Have you ever wanted to learn how to can meat? I want to make it as simple and as scrumptious as possible for you today, and I want to show you just how to can ground beef. So stick around in the next few minutes as I talk you through the process. I've just finished canning a whole bunch of meat, and it's already smelling amazing in here. I can't wait to share this with you. Stay with us. There are really about 14 reasons why you would want to can ground beef. It sounds counterintuitive unless you start thinking about it, and then you realize, yes, it saves electricity because you don't have to freeze it like most people store their ground beef. It doesn't have to take up the space in the freezer, so that is freed up for something else. It's pre-cooked, so you don't even have to heat it up if you don't want to once you've got it canned. It's pre-seasoned, so you're saving a whole lot of angst that way, unless you choose to do it without the seasoning. But then it's useful for casseroles and all kinds of different recipes where you're going to be needing ground meat that's sauteed and ready to go. You can just dump in a jar of your already canned meat. You'll find through the winter it makes it so much easier when you come home from work and you don't have to mess with a whole long process of preparing your evening meals. So I want us, and as well as making it shelf stable for quite a long time. There are many reasons why you want to consider doing this. It's going to be delicious, but let me talk you through just the main elements that you're going to need to make this a success. Of course, first of all, you're going to need a pressure canner. You cannot can meat in a water bath or steam canner or any other version. You don't have to get the fanciest one. This is an all-American 921 pressure canner that I'm using here today, but if you have a Presto or another brand that works well, as long as it's a pressure canner that you know how to use well, go ahead and use it. It's going to be great. You're going to want good jars, and of course a pint-sized jar is going to give about the perfect amount for 2 to 3 people. But if you have a larger family or a bigger group, you may be thankful for a little bit bigger jars. This is exactly the size of jar that's in between a pint and a quart. So you're going to see me use these often, and I just love them. They have a wide mouth, which makes it easy to get the meat in and out. And whenever you're canning any kinds of meats, a wide mouth jar is kind of the go-to as the easiest to use. And then you want good sealing lids. Now, I will say that the ball jars come with their own new lid. However, I don't believe those are made in the USA anymore, and I really do like supporting our local folks. So there's this wonderful company up in Ohio, Superb Canning, that they didn't pay me to sponsor this or anything like that, but they do make an even more superior lid than the ball canning jar lids, in my opinion. These are made in the USA. They have a scripture right inside the box, which I love so much when you open, and I've noticed that each box has a different scripture. It's really kind of cool. But let me pull these out and just show you how thick they are. They have a blue ring, which is handsome looking, but it's thicker. I mean, you can't poke your fingernail through that or anything. These are a substantial lid, and also the button, I don't know if you can hear that, but they have a substantial sucker down top lid that you really hear pop well when you can with these lids. It's very easy to tell if there's a compromised seal or if they're doing what they're supposed to. So I've been very pleased with these, and that's what we're using today. Always use new lids, whatever brand you use, always new lids, and you can reuse old rings, but I do have new ones here today. The other things that you're going to want, of course, are a jar lifter. I don't know who invented this or how long ago, but they need to be in the Guinness Book of World Records of smart people, because I love that they made this so easy so you don't burn yourself getting your jars in and out of a canner. All right, that's almost all you need as far as elements to make this work. You do need some good meat, and when you're canning meat, you want to kind of go lean, not completely fat-free, or it's not good tasting. you'd need about 1 part fat to 3 parts, I'm sorry, 1 part fat to 3 parts beef. So today we're doing about half grass-fed ground beef and ground bison. All right, so I've got this on pretty high heat right now. It's going to cook relatively fast, and today I'm just doing 4 pounds worth of ground beef. You could can it just like this with no salt, no spices of any kind, but I like to do a couple of things here. I like to put it on high heat so that I get just a little bit of browniness to it, but we're not going to cook it all the way through. And while it's cooking, I'm going to add just kind of a tablespoon of each of these. It's going to make it really easy. I'm going to add a tablespoon of Himalayan pink salt. And let me do that right now while you're with me. So a tablespoon of Himalayan pink salt sprinkled all over that. Then I'm going to take a tablespoon of ground pepper. You could get fancy if you wanted and use the ground from scratch type stuff, but the reality is often I notice when I'm doing it over heat like this, it ends up getting too much moisture up there into the grinder of it. So there's a tablespoon of ground pepper, and then I'm going to put 1 to 2 tablespoons of minced onion and minced garlic. Both of them are dry, and they could be homemade dried if you wanted, or they could be, you could even caramelize some onions and do that to make it extra fancy, but really this is going to be good enough. I like a lot, so I'm going to put in 2. I told you 1 of each of these to keep it simple, but the reality is I usually like a lot. So 2 tablespoons of the onion and garlic is probably what I'm adding here. You can add as much or as little as you would like. That'll soak up the moisture obviously right now, but also when it's canning, it'll soak up the moisture beautifully and really season the meat nicely. Okay, so now that we've got all that in there, it's almost ready to go. I still see some pink, and I want just a little more of the pink out of there, but not 100% of it. All right, I think it's about ready, you guys. All we have to do now is get this in the jars, and it's ready to start processing. Okay, I'm turning that off. It smells wonderful. All right, I've got the beef all completely ready, and bison. And just so you know, you could do this with venison. If you've got elk or wild game, this is a perfect way to preserve it. We're just using this today. What I've got here, really, we're going to kind of let cool down to almost room temperature, because we're not using a hot pack method right now. We're actually using the same instructions that you would do if this was room temperature. But you want a good funnel because it's going to protect the rims of your jars. You want to, of course, have checked the rims to make sure that if you're using old jars, there's not even any chance of a hairline fracture or you know, anything that could mess up that perfect seal that's going to be needed for this to can correctly. But this is going to protect it from getting dirty as well, which is always nice. Also, I want to say, if by chance you find that your meat is has a little liquid at the bottom, go ahead and strain that off. You don't want to add that to this because it's probably got more fat in it than you're wanting to put in the canning jars. These are going to hold a little over 1 pound each, so it won't surprise me if I just get 3 full jars of this, but I'll see as soon as I get there. Also, we're filling these up to the top, but we're not squishing the meat down real tight. We're just filling it up, making sure there are no air pockets throughout, and we're only filling it up to that collar right there. That's the indication that that's 1 inch from the very top. You don't want to go higher than that, so keep that in mind. Otherwise, you could have it be overfilled and siphoning is what they call it when the water inside just starts coming out of the lid, and you don't want that. All right, I'm using organic beef broth. I always wonder exactly what's organic about it. You really want grass-fed beef broth whenever you're getting meat or milk or any product from cattle. You want grass-fed and organic. Okay, I'm just filling these right up to that 1-inch mark, not any further. You might hear that as it bubbles down into place. And we'll even, after we do this, the last little step is to kind of run some sort of a rod down in there just to make sure there are no air bubbles that have somehow sealed themselves off and not gotten the broth in there with them. Here we go. Just making sure. No big. And I actually think this one is a hint overfilled, so I'm going to take out just a smidgen of that meat to make sure it fully fits under that 1-inch mark from the top. I do not want any siphoning or any of it coming out in the process of canning. The last step before these are ready to process is just saturating a little cloth with some white vinegar, and you're going to want to carefully go all the way around each of those rims just to make sure, again, no hairline fractures and no gunk. You don't want any kind of obstruction for that seal to have to fight with. And once you've got it there, you're ready to put those lids on. Just make sure they are clean. Interestingly, with pressure canning now, that they have changed the laws or rules that they had of pressure canning, saying that you do not have to heat these up ahead of time to sterilize them, because the process is going to take care of itself in the pressure canner with the high heat and high intensity pressure. All right, ready for the rings. When they say put on the rings finger tight, you want to just use 3 fingers, not your whole grip. Just use 3 fingers and tighten it down just gently until it stops moving. Not cranked on tight or anything. So it'll move freely, and then once it stops just about there. Thankfully, the process is pretty gracious, but you don't want them too tight or it could be bad for the whole process. You need, see, the air has to be able to escape, but not any more than just the air. So that's why these hold the lid, that flat part, in place long enough for the oxygen to escape actually through that seal, and then the rings are there still to hold it in place so that the heat actually pressurizes then down and seals up that good blue seal that you see around the edge there. If you haven't seen a pressure canner before, I want to just at least introduce you to it so you're familiar with it. It's going to come with all these stickers that they do want you to keep on it that have all kinds of warnings of heat and pressure and don't leave it unattended and all of that. Some people like to take those off, and I probably will someday. But it's going to have a gauge here that's really important. It's a geared gauge, and you need to make sure that it's in good working order. If there's any doubt that it might not be working, definitely go and have it checked, or call the manufacturer and see what they can help you with getting you a new gauge. And then over here on the side, you're going to see the steam vent. This, you're going to have a weight that sits on top of. If you look closely, you're going to see that it is listed with a 5, 10, and 15 pounds that is representative of. So the 5 is directly across from this little spot. You want the 5 down, and out of this hole is kind of where that 5 pounds of pressure is regulated. Or if I wanted to have 10 pounds of pressure, I put the 10 right there over top of it, and this is regulating that, or 15 pounds. If you're going to need to look up exactly where you live. You can even Google, what is my elevation? Because that makes a huge difference in which one of these numbers you're going to use and what you're going to be looking for on this gauge. The USDA website or your county extension office can tell you. Now, incidentally, here where I am standing in this exact spot, it's 907 feet elevation above sea level. So because of that, I fall under the 1,000-foot mark, which means that for this meat, I am supposed to process it with 10 pounds of pressure. So I'll be doing that here in just a few minutes. Now, Interestingly though, you don't put this on at first. You have to wait till a certain thing happens here before you know it's time to put that little weight on. And then I just want to bring you attention to this one little nubbin back here that's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can turn this around. This is just a safety measure that is built into these so that it's a rubber stopper of sorts, but before this whole thing explodes, which is what everyone just dreads and thinks, oh no, that could happen to me. Imagine if it all exploded. They've built this rubber stopper in so that that would blow out first and be able to depressurize this before you have like this whole thing become something that it shouldn't be. You understand. So be thankful that that little nubbin is there, and that's what's going to save anything like the rest of this exploding in the event that somehow you weren't attending it as you should. Okay, also you're going to see something interesting about this steam canner in particular, the All-American, is that it has no rubber ring, where if you were to use a Presto or some of the other kinds of pressure canners, they have a rubber gasket around here. Well, this is stainless steel or aluminum, very, very thick aluminum, and it doesn't use any kind of a gasket. You just have to fit it down perfectly with the little arrow here lined up with this special little indentation here down below it, and then you'll see how these carefully are able to slide underneath and grip a hold of that as it should, so that you're ready to tighten it down. There's a little bit more to it than that, and you'll see here in just a minute, because you want to make sure the lid is perfectly level as well, and we'll do that here in just a minute. But to start, what we need to do is you start with it just right at cold temperature. I mean, it's at room temperature right now, and in the bottom it has this little elevator that elevates all of the jars just 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch above the bottom of it. If you don't have this, you have complete disaster. So remember to make sure you check that you have your little bottom in it as it should be. If you don't have one, you can use just rings, jar rings. If I could just put 5 of those around in the bottom, and they would elevate the jars just fine. Keep in mind you can get by with that just fine, but this is going to keep them from touching the bottom. And once I put that in the bottom, I'm going to put the jars right in here. Now today I am doing, as you have seen probably, I'm doing 3 pint and a halves of Hamburger that is seasoned, and I'm doing 4 of the seasoned pork loin, which is going to be fantastic. It's not cooked. The Hamburger or ground beef is cooked, but we're putting them all in here because thankfully they all use the same exact time and pressure for their processing. This will hold 8 of these wide mouth jars. Incidentally, I only have 7 here. That was the amount of meat that I have, so it's perfect. I've got all of them fit in there nicely. Now I'm going to fill it up so that there is 3 inches worth of water in there. And you just want regular room temperature water. It's not like a water bath canner where you're filling it so that there's water an inch above the top of the lids. In this situation, we just are putting in 3 inches worth of water there in the bottom, which will come up about halfway on the sides of these jars. All right, we've got the jars in here. We've got about 3.5 inches worth of water. We have the little elevator to keep them off the floor, and that's of course very important. And they're not touching each other right now, or the sides. They may adjust a little bit as they go, but they're going to be just fine. I have the burner already set just now to high, even though I started with room temperature water here in the bottom. And now it's time to put on the lid. For some folks, this can be a huge ordeal. This is the most complicated part. I'm hoping it makes it simple for us today. But I'm just lining the pointer that you saw up with the little indentation on the side of my canner. See if it seats down in there nicely, and then all of these should come underneath as they should, kind of the little. Now I'm going to visually inspect it and make sure that it's equally the same on each side. See how it kind of has play in it? and we don't want one side to be higher than the other. So give me just a minute and I'm going to make sure. This is a pro canner tip that you may or may not be interested in knowing, but it might save you some angst if you're a newbie. They call it the 3-lid method, and what you can do is, so I have the lid on right now, but I've got 3 canning lids that are smashed together just like that, and I'm going to set them in here and see how that kind of is right there. If I can make sure that this lid on this side exactly has that 3-lid gap, and then I come to the opposite side, and nope, they don't fit in quite as well. But if I can adjust it so that they do, and kind of bring it around the whole thing, it's almost like a little measurer that helps you say, oh, okay, in the back it's too tight, or in the front it's too tight. I think we've got it. I really do. I think we've got it as perfect as it's going to be. Once you've got it there, thankfully, you're going to take opposing sides. So it'll be these 2 first, or these 2 first. There's actually 6 of them all together, and once we've got it on, we just want to take the 2 that are opposite each other, it doesn't matter which 2, and we want to crank them down just about 3 turns until they're just barely finger tight. Then we take the opposite ones over here, and we'll do the same with them, barely finger tight, and then the opposites, and again about 3 turns makes them about perfectly finger tight if I have done it right. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead back to those 2 originals and make it fully tight. So there's another half turn, another half turn, and another half turn, and that just go all the way around until you've got all of it fully tight. Remember, I've got the heat on high now. Good, looks like it's good to go, but I just want to make sure you're aware. Let me turn it toward you carefully. It's a heavy booger. I want to make sure that you recognize this is completely by itself with no weight on it. You do not put the weight on until this starts spewing steam in a perfect constant stream, okay? So we've let this go for about 10 minutes where it's just this straight steam stream coming up with no breaks in it. It doesn't just go and then stop, go and stop. What it's doing is it's getting all of the oxygen and such out of the inside of this. And even right here, the gauge is starting to build. It won't build a whole lot. And there's the timer. It won't build a whole lot until I put this on. But now that we know that this is ready, it's ready for me to go ahead and put this on. And we know it needs to be at 10 pounds of pressure. So I've got that ready. And I'm going to just set it on, and it's going to start building its pressure even more. All right. Phew! Much quieter. Now, what's happening next, though, is that it's building the pressure, and you're going to see this gauge start moving up and up and up until it gets all the way to where it needs to be. All right, you're going to notice it's a lot louder now. It's reached the temperature that we need. It's over 10 pounds, but it's under the 15. It's right at about 12 pounds of pressure, and we're going to leave it there, but I'm going to turn the heat down. It was on high, and now it's time to turn it down to just about a medium high so that it doesn't get cooler, but doesn't get too much hotter either. And you'll notice that there's quite a rhythm going on over here with this. You'll hear it as it jigs like this, and then it'll pause and just kind of hold itself for a second, and then it'll start jigging some more, and you'll know you've got the right amount of pressure and heat going on, and that's when we start the timer. All right, so our timer went off telling us that the time is up, and that's good news. So what you do at the end of that time is just come over and turn the heat off. That's all you have to do, nothing more. Now, if you are hefty and you want to move it off the heat, I know some directions say move the canner off the heat, but if you knew how heavy this is by itself and then loaded with all those jars and that water, it's too big for me to be moving right now. So without a catastrophe, and it's exceptionally hot. So when you turn the heat off, like we have, you notice that this quickly stops jiggling It just becomes quiet, and this is almost returned down to 0 pounds of pressure. We had it up at that about 12 psi for most of this time, and now it's almost down to 0. Once it does get all the way down to 0, that's when we'll be able to actually take the little weight off and even slowly take the lid off in the same way we put it on, just backwards, and lift those jars out and let them cool on the counter here. I'm gonna put the lid away from me when I lift it off. And let's see if we did it right. Ooh. It looks wonderful. I'm just gonna hope that it does what it's supposed to do. You really want to try and separate these by about 1 inch so they have room to breathe in between them. I give them about 1 inch space apart between each jar and just let them rest. Don't twist the lids tighter that are very loose now. Don't try and poke on the tops or anything like that. Right now I think all of them except for 2 have already sucked in their top. Very loud, nice click sound and assurance that those are sealed correctly, and I'm sure these 2 will take their time and hopefully click in the next few moments. But what I want you to know is it's not that hard. By tomorrow morning I'll come out here, these will all be back to room temperature. I will trust that all the lids will be nicely inverted and I'll know that they've all sealed well. To test that, you just take the ring off and lift it by the lid, and it should lift up and hold all of its weight easily without coming unsealed or anything like that. And those will be ready to store away in a pantry for a good long while. Now, if you have not considered learning how to can meat, this is the day to do it. This is the time. There is not a time to wait for later to come when it's going to be better for you. You're the youngest you will ever be right now. Time is not in the middle of a crisis as much as it may be later, and you will be so thankful for right now when you took the time to learn how to can meat and invest in the right canner that's going to work for you and your family. So, we've got lots of good stuff coming. Anyway, we'll see you next time, and until I see you again, go out and find someone to be a blessing to today. Thank you and God bless you. Bye-bye. Hey there, before you go, I would love to leave you with a quick word of scripture. This is out of Isaiah. That's a book of the Old Testament in the Holy Bible. And it's chapter 49, verses 15 and 16. It says, "Can a woman forget her nursing child, that she should have no compassion on the son of her womb? Even these may forget, but I will not forget you. Behold, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands." These are words God spoke. He has engraved you on the palms of his hands. It's getting dark out there. Now go out and glow.